afternoon. This is Gray. I'm one of the staff members in the Scarlet and Blue Run8 server. Today's video will be uphill train control, which will cover how to perform a safe uphill start, maintain your train's speed, and an uphill stop and a basic use case of fencing. Let's take this auto rack train and get it ready for departure. In my downhill video script, I go over the full details, so I'll speed up the playback through this section. I've called auto, received routing, and performed my initial terminal break test. We'll be starting from a worst case scenario, a server restart or a fresh world save, which means the trains are in a neutral slack state. First, we'll apply a 20-pound set on the automatic brake and let the brakes set up. Now, we'll release the handbrakes with F5. There should be very little change in the coupler force if you've aired up properly. Now, bail off the locomotives by holding period until the brakes release on all of your locomotives. At time of recording, this should take about 5 seconds per locomotive in the largest lash up you have in your train. If you have a well-built train, you won't need to use DPU fencing. The definitions of a well-built train are beyond the scope of this video and can be found in another post. If you are trying to use control methods to bunch up the train while going over sustained 1.5 or higher percentage grades, all you are doing is extending the time of travel. I also invite you to show me a picture of a sane train lash up on a 2% uphill grade that is bunched together. If you have DPUs, you're going to have parts of the train in tension or compression. That's just how physics is in both the real world and in Run8. With that out of the way, throttle up to notch 3, and wait for your amps to stop climbing. Please note that not all locomotives are created equal. The standard cabs, such as the Jeep 40s and the SD45s, are the fastest to load. The SD70 Aces are next, followed by the Gevos, and then the longest loading locomotive are the Dash 9s. Once your locomotives have loaded up to notch 3 and the amps are no longer climbing, release the automatic brake. If you're about 1.0 horsepower per ton higher than the grade where you're starting, you should accelerate up the hill safely. If you're closer to the minimum horsepower per ton, you may need to go into notch 4 to start. In extremely rare cases, you may need to go into notch 5 in order to start moving. But as I said, that is extremely rare. Now all we do is let the train accelerate. As the speed increases, the amps will begin to drop off. Please note that in the first few miles an hour, the amperage will stay the same. Eventually, our acceleration will begin to decrease. At that point, you can give the train another notch on the throttle. If you're in a locomotive that has an accelerometer, wait for it to stabilize underneath 4 miles an hour before increasing the throttle. Once you hit notch 8 and you're on a sustained grade, there's not much else that you can do until the grade levels out. If the grade temporarily levels out, be gentle on the throttle. Don't go straight from notch 8 to idle, then back to notch 8. Let's say there's a lot of traffic on the hill in front of us, and our signal aspects are no longer indicating clear. In most cases, you'll already be going under 30 miles an hour, so you won't need to reduce your speed. Some signals will have a small board with a G painted on it. This means that you are authorized to proceed past a stop signal at restricted speed. I find it best to slow the train down to 5 to 10 miles an hour, which is generally notch 4 or notch 5. Just make sure that you can stop in half the distance that you can see. Let's assume that we want to stop this train at the next control point signal. We want to be crawling our train up to that final signal at about 5 to 10 miles an hour. A simple way to slow down your train while you're traveling uphill is to slowly reduce the notches on the throttle. Only reduce the throttle by 1 notch at a time and let the train decelerate until it reaches a new equilibrium speed. Once you are close to the point that you want to stop, and you are between 5 to 10 miles an hour, bail off your locomotive brakes using the period key, and then make a 10-pound reduction on the automatic brake. Keep bailing off the locomotive brakes until the brake pipe matches the equalizing reservoir. As your speed decreases, decrease your throttle down to notch 1. Once you come to a complete stop, apply another 5 pounds on the automatic brake, reduce the throttle to idle, and then make a full application on the independent brake. As you can see, using this method to slowly stop your train will leave your train with very little in-train forces in it. Leaving your train with as little in-train force is critical to maintaining stability in a server. If you leave a train with high in-train forces, it is likely going to corrupt itself in the near future on another player. The last topic in this video will be fencing. Once again, I'll state that if you have a well-built train, you don't need to fence. Fencing is a method that allows engineers in the head end of the train to command the distributed locomotives to go into different throttle settings, or even go into dynamic brakes. Here, in Pixel Train land, the only realistic use of fencing is to help start your train when you're very close to the minimum horsepower per ton. Using fencing will let you set the distributed units 1 to 2 notches more than the head end. Here's a heavy grain train, probably the heaviest that will ever run on the Scarlet and Blue server. We have 5 head end engines, 5 mid train, and 2 on the rear with about 16,000 tons. Let's use fencing to help get this train started. Although, I will state again that this train will start without fencing. If you don't know any of the keyboard shortcuts for the following commands, reference the controls drop-down at the top of the screen, then choose keyboard. After putting the reverser in forward and applying a 20-pound set and bailing off the locomotives, use DPU fence decrease to locate the green fence and move it between the lead set of engines and the distributed power. Then use DPU throttle increase and shift them into notch 5. The radio communication between locomotives will take a few seconds to acknowledge the command and then return any engine information. Increase your throttle to notch 3. Wait for all the engines to spool up, and then release the automatic brake, and your train should start. Once the acceleration stays underneath 4 miles an hour, increase the DPU throttle by 1 notch and also increase your throttle up by 1 notch. Once your DPUs are notch 8, continue increasing the throttle on your lead consist at the appropriate time. When it comes to stopping the train uphill, I find it simplest to not use any fencing due to the communication delays, naturally keeping the GPU spooled up for a few extra seconds as you notch down. Please feel free to ask any questions or request further video topics in the appropriate channel. Ray out.